This video is sponsored by Warframe.
Longswords, the blade that defined the medieval ages. Both elegant and brutal in their design, these swords have carved a bloody path throughout history. But what if that longsword you bought wasn't pulled from a magical stone, and instead was pulled straight from a Bud Cave magazine? By the end of this video, you'll be able to tell the difference between a quality longsword and a piece of junk just by looking at it. And if that doesn't make the maiden swoon, I don't know what will.
Is your longsword real or fake? Tonight, we'll take a look at two different swords. One shitty, the other sweet. Will you be able to taste the difference? Find out on Is Your Longsword Real or Fake?
For today's video, I have something truly special to share with you. I have here a beautiful, custom-made Oakshot Type 18A longsword by Lockwood Swords. It has a 6150 high carbon steel blade that is mathematically precise in its balance. This baby is the Lamborghini of longswords, and it has a price to match, coming in at around $2,000 after tax and shipping. And to compare, I have this $200 cold steel Italian longsword that I bought on Amazon. Now, while I mostly collect katanas, I have immense respect for longswords. On top of them being engineering marvels, their beauty and versatility is undeniable. They're the physical representation of honor and chivalry, immortalized in movies like Excalibur, Lord of the Rings, and Kingdom of Heaven. Unlike Kenjutsu, historical European martial arts, aka HEMA, is still fairly new. So the lack of competition drives up prices, making it harder to get a decent longsword unless you're willing to shell out the cash for it. And like I said in my last video, $200 gets you very little when it comes to swords. That'd be like trying to buy a car for $2,000. Sure, it'll get you from point A to point B, but it'll definitely be champagne colored and smell like vintage farts. Speaking of farts, let's take a closer look at this cold steel longsword. Now, to the average person, this looks like a pretty sweet sword, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking so, but you'd be dead wrong. Cold steel's got a bit of a reputation for poor quality control and extremely tasteless cutting demonstrations. You want to buy swords from a guy who puts meat in a boot? Not me. This particular longsword is part of Cold Steel's Man-at-Arms line, which they tout as their affordable counterparts to their main line of swords. This one being half the price of the original. You can tell because this one is all blacked out, which aesthetically I really like, but my God, can you tell the difference? All the fittings seem to be the same as the original, except they cheaped out on the most important part, the blade. It's got a bunch of crap all over it. The original cold steel Italian longsword has nickel fittings and a 1060 high carbon steel blade, which I've seen do some decent cutting. Strangely, on the Cold Steel website, they say this cheaper version is made of 1090 high carbon steel, but I call bullshit. Every other site seems to say something different. Some say 1060, others say 1055. Now, if you're not familiar with high carbon steel, let me put it simply. The higher the number, the higher the carbon content, making it harder, more expensive, and generally improving edge retention. Now, why on earth would the budget version use more expensive steel than the original? And to further prove my point, this sword clearly has a double beveled edge. Real swords only have a single bevel edge. This makes the blade lighter, sharper, and means less resistance when cutting. Instead, these guys took the lazy way out and just ground an edge into this on a belt sander. And they didn't even do a good job with that, because this is without a doubt the dullest sword I've ever received. This sword is so incredibly dull, I don't even think it'll be able to cut paper. Just basically tears it. It's ridiculous how dull this thing is. This goddamn sword won't even cut paper. Now, I can't prove that they're lying about the steel because I'm not a metallurgist with a lab to test it, but I would bet my left nut that this is made of 1055 or worse. Now on the upside, I actually like the fittings on this sword. The handle's wrapped in decent quality leather, the fishtail pommel and curved crossguard have an elegance to them, and the blade fits nicely into the crossguard. There's a bit of a gap where you can clearly see the epoxy they used to lock the blade in, but it's not bad. The sword also comes with a decent scabbard, which is nice, but to cut costs, they didn't make it with a wood core. Instead, they glued in 2 flimsy pieces of plastic to create friction in order to keep the sword from falling out. Which is fine in theory, but it makes it so that whenever you pull the sword out, the blade is covered in this weird white powdery substance. This thing looks like Tony Montana's personal Coke blade. All right, enough about this guy. Let's get to the good stuff. Now this is the Lockwood SL1019B, an Oakshot Type 18A longsword with a 35-inch blade and an 11.5-inch handle. This thing is a work of art. It has an elegant hooked crossguard to prevent an enemy's blade from sliding into you during a bind, a gorgeous leather-wrapped handle with a solid wood core that's been wire-wrapped and ribbed for your pleasure.
My lord!
The pommel is perfectly weighted to counterbalance the blade, and just look at this thing. It's like a mini mace. This would do some serious damage. I even paid an extra $500 to have this custom scabbard and sword belt made. Since it was custom fitted by the swordsmith himself, this thing fits like a glove. Look how thin this scabbard is. There is zero rattle. The blade fit is a thing of beauty. All the materials are super high quality. Steven over at Lockwood really outdid himself. All right, now let's take a look at this blade.
Oh my God!
This thing is a beast. It's made of 6150 high carbon steel, which is a superb steel for a longsword of this size. The blade geometry makes this sword excellent at both cutting and thrusting, and the extensive distal tapering makes the blade feel nimble and lively in the hands. It's even complemented with an exact matching fuller, which dramatically reduces weight, allowing the sword to be perfectly balanced. The crossguard fit is also immaculate. It's tight and clean with no signs of grind marks or epoxy. And in terms of sharpness, let me tell you, this thing is scary sharp. Sharper than most of the katanas I own, and that's saying something. Let's do a little paper test. Now that's sharp. You know what? I got something else. Let's test it on a magic card. Okay, this thing is crazy, crazy sharp. Thanks to modern technology, swords can now be mathematically precise in their weight and balance. The amount of skill required to forge a sword of this quality and balance back in medieval times would be incredibly rare and sought after. We're talking an epic level rare drop, a purple item for sure. So when I say this sword is perfect, I'm not exaggerating. This is some endgame level shit. The kind of stuff you see in the trailer that makes you buy the game. All right, you guys have heard me ramble on enough. Let's see what these babies can do. All right guys, so we're going to see how well these swords cut. I have here the Cold Steel Italian Longsword Man-at-Arms Edition. This is the budget-friendly version. It's about half the price as the original, and it's a nice looking sword. It comes with this cool scabbard. It's all black, as you can see, which is very much fits my aesthetic, which I like. I really like the way the sword looks. All the fittings and stuff are nice, but ooh, this blade. Because of the double beveled edge, it's really dull. And I think it's gonna have a lot of trouble getting through this target. That double bevel creates a lot of friction and drag when you're kind of trying to make it through a target. So we will see if this can make it through. I think it will be able to, but I'm gonna have to really swing for the fences with this one. Balance is really weird on this sword. If you do this test right here, you can tell the pivot point is right here. I know in my last video I said that long swords need to be balanced towards the tip. But what I meant, the pivot point, you want to be at the tip of the blade. That way when you're facing your opponent, you can keep the tip facing them the whole time, and you can kind of just maneuver the blade around, because you generally want to have the tip of your sword facing your opponent. But if you see here, the pivot point's around here, and it just makes it a little unwieldy. This sword is 2.5 pounds, but it feels heavy, it feels awkward. I have to really try to get the tip of the sword to move forward. It's just not well balanced. I'm gonna find the percussion point on this sword. So you see how much wobble there is? So the percussion point is a point on the blade in which you can hit the blade and it has very little wobble. So you see right here is the percussion point, because when I hit it right there, there's very little wobble compared to that, or even at the tip right there. So I'm gonna try to aim for right here. It's a cool sword, not bad for 200 bucks, but this double beveled edge really just kills it for me. You only see this on like wall hangers and basically fake swords. So we'll see. Let's see if this can make it through. Made it through. Kind of janked up the target a bit, but it cut it. Oh. You see, I didn't make it through the target there because I struck it here. I should be striking more on the percussion point. The percussion point makes it so that there's less vibration in the blade when it goes through, so it causes less resistance. If you look right here, you see how it's all mangled up and kind of wavy going through. I'm gonna try to hit with the percussion point, which is right about here. So I can hit right there. See that? Way easier. So that's why the percussion point of the sword is extremely important. This is specific to a lot of European swords, not really katanas so much, because katanas are not really that flexible. They're pretty rigid, which makes them better slashing and cutting swords. Long swords can do the job, but you have to have a lot more finesse, more accuracy, is because the sword is more versatile. You know, you can't be the best at thrusting and the best at slashing. You can't have it all. Overall, I would say the aesthetics are nice on the sword. It looks cool. I would never use this for cutting really, or it's definitely not combat of any kind. Just a cool looking wall hanger, I guess.
Combat?
Hey, you don't know. You don't know my life. The balance is terrible on this sword. The edge is awful, but it looks pretty cool. And for some people, that's enough. That's fine. All right, now onto the good stuff. I have here my Lockwood Oakshot Type 18A longsword. This thing is such a beast. Also, look how beautiful it looks in this custom scabbard. Really, really, really nice. This entire piece is absolutely beautiful. It fits perfectly. Look at this. It's pretty nice, right? If you saw a guy walk up with this sword, what would you think?
Depends on what year it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not only is it absolutely beautiful, but it is probably the sharpest sword I own. This sword is so incredibly sharp that it actually scares me a little bit. On top of how razor sharp it is, this sword is balanced to perfection. The pivot point is exactly where you want it, at the tip of the sword. That way you can keep the tip pointed at your opponent, no matter how you maneuver, allowing you to quickly and rapidly change your position. It also feels incredibly light in my hands. This sword is about 3.8 pounds. It's a full pound heavier than the Cold Steel Longsword, but it feels lighter, feels way more lively in the hands because the distal tapering, it's a little hard to explain, but the tip of the sword just wants to go out. It just wants to move. So I could swing this sword so much faster than that one, even though it's full pound heavier. So the percussion point's wider on this sword than it is that one. All right, I'm gonna start real simple. I'm gonna just do a simple diagonal cut, but I'm gonna do it with as little effort as possible. Those last couple cuts, I'm just getting lazy with it, and it's still, it's like cheating. Woo! I love that sound the sword makes. That was beautiful. Wow. That took basically no effort, and the recovery is really easy because of how well balanced it is. Look how fast I can move this blade. Look how, it cannot be understated how important that balance is. There's absolutely no way I would have been able to make it through a target with this Verhau, that Cold Steel sword. Man, it's like a laser. I love this thing. I could cut with this thing all day. All right, well, I think the results speak for themselves. Oof, and it's still just as sharp as when I started. This might be my new favorite sword. How swiftly it moves and how lively it is in my hands. Beautiful. Besides sharpness, the main difference between a real longsword and a fake longsword is the balance. The balance is extremely difficult to get right. It takes a lot of precision, a lot of skill in terms of engineering and blacksmithing to get it to be properly balanced. And that's where a lot of the money goes, because if you're buying a $200, $300 longsword, they're just mass producing those things. They're just pumping them out because they know the people using them won't even know the difference. Those people are gonna buy those long swords and they're gonna be like, oh cool, I have a sword, and they're gonna just be chugging that copium saying like, yeah, it feels light. There's a difference between light and properly balanced. And I think I just proved that pretty well today. Now, while I'm impressed the Cold Steel sword was able to make it through the target, it was no easy feat. A less experienced cutter would struggle to cut anything with a sword this dull and poorly balanced. Overall, I'm gonna give the Cold Steel Italian Longsword Man-at-Arms Edition 1 pair of cargo shorts out of 5. I'll give it a point for affordability and decent aesthetics, but overall, it's not a real sword. Compared to any other decent sword, this thing's like something you'd win at a Ren Fair sausage eating contest. In contrast, the Lockwood sword exceeded all of my expectations, which were already pretty high considering it cost me around $2 grand plus an additional $500 for the custom scabbard. But even with the high-end price tag, this sword still blew me away. Overall, I'm gonna give the Lockwood sword 5 swooning maidens out of 5.
My lord?
From the fit and finish to its brilliant keen edge and perfect balance, I have no complaints. It takes a sword of this caliber for you to really notice all the flaws of a mass-produced sword. Only downside besides the price is the long wait time. Each Lockwood sword is custom made to order, and the production time is stated to be 8 to 12 months. But due to COVID, I had to wait almost 2 years to receive mine. But it's understandable. This level of quality takes time to achieve, and there isn't 1 millimeter on this sword where the attention to detail and love for the craft aren't strikingly evident. So if you're in the market for an exceptionally well-made blade and you're willing to wait, check out Lockwood swords. I'll have links to both swords down in the description. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for today's video, and that's Warframe. You may have heard of Warframe, but they just released their biggest update yet with DUVIRI-Paradox. This brand new story-based adventure introduces a massive, ever-changing open world to explore, loot, and battle your way through. Best of all, it's free to play on both PC and console with crossplay. If you like swords and gritty sci-fi adventures with intense third-person combat, then Warframe is the game for you. Armed with an arsenal of alien weaponry, special abilities, and characters to choose from, you'll slice and dice your way through the galaxy with style. So click the link in the description below to download Warframe today and use my promo code to get a bunch of free items, including the Bratton Assault Rifle, 3 days of affinity, and a credit booster, all just for signing up. Thanks again to Warframe for sponsoring this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.